ضيوفنا الكرام، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أنا محدثتكم ميرا المطوع، ويسعدني ويشرفني أن أرحب بكم اليوم باسم مؤسسة سلامة بنت حمدان آل نهيان في أول ورشة عمل لرعاية الأطفال الصغار. ورش عمل رعاية الأطفال الصغار هي عبارة عن سلسلة برامج تفاعلية لمساعدة الآباء والأمهات والمسؤولين على رعاية الأطفال في تعلم المبادئ الأساسية التي تساعدهم في تنمية وتربية أطفالهم، حيث يتم التحدث فيها من قبل مجموعة من الخبراء المختصين في مجال التربية في المرحلة المبكرة لحياة الطفل من جامعة ييل. قبل أن نتعرف على محادثتنا، اسمحوا لي أن أطلعكم على نمط سير برنامجنا اليوم. ستلقي المتحدثة كلمة، ومن ثم سوف يفتح المجال لاستقبال الأسئلة من قبل الجمهور. والآن لنبدأ برنامجنا. عنوان ورشة عمل اليوم هي تنشئة أطفالنا، كيف يمكن للآباء والأمهات المساهمة في تنمية أطفالهم. تقدمها الدكتورة نانسي كلوز. تشغل الدكتورة نانسي كلوز وظيفة أستاذة مشاركة في برنامج التربية في المرحلة المبكرة لحياة الطفل بجامعة ييل. الدكتورة نانسي متخصصة بعلاج الأطفال دون السن الخامسة. لدى الدكتورة نانسي كتاب بعنوان استمع للأطفال، تحدث معهم عن مشاكلهم، كما أن لديها العديد من الجوائز المرموقة. لا أود أن أطيل عليكم أكثر، فاسمحوا لي الآن أن أرحب بالدكتورة نانسي كلوز.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's wonderful to see all of you here. I feel so proud and humbled to be part of this amazing collaboration between the Salama bin Hamdan Al Nahyan Foundation and Yale University, and also to be giving the first parent workshop. I acknowledge and applaud the wisdom and passion of the foundation and its support of the field of early childhood development. I'm looking forward to sharing some ideas with you, and especially excited to engage in conversation with you about the joys and challenges of parenting. I have studied and worked with young children for many, many years, and still I learn something new about development every single day that I go to work with children and their families. I would say that my most challenging and fulfilling job has been raising our two wonderful sons. And so I understand the love, the joy, sorrow, anxiety, frustration, pride, disappointment, anger, fatigue, humility, and empathy that can be a part of what I consider the most difficult job on the planet. I imagine that you probably have some adjectives to add to that list. So it would be fun to think to yourself what they might be. My topic tonight is resilience, that is supporting connection, coping, and confidence in our children. Resilience has been a topic of studies of how children overcome difficult situations, such as experiencing chronic stress, coping with a traumatic event, but resilience has also been described as how well children cope with just the normal stresses of growing up, being in a family, having friends, being in difficult situations, and knowing what to do when something is too hard. Tonight I will focus on the three concepts of connection, coping, and confidence, and I believe help children to become resilient, well-adjusted, and competent. I'm assuming that there's a wide range of ages of children represented by their parents here tonight. But my hope is that understanding these ideas will allow parents to support children at any age. So let's take a minute so I can find out a little bit about the ages of your children. How many people in the audience are expecting their first child? Any hands? There's one. Congratulations. You're embarking on a wonderful adventure. How many have infants? Oh, hope you're getting some sleep. How many have toddlers between 1 and 3? Wonderful. How about children between 3 and 6? Oh, this is terrific. Older than 6? Any with adolescents? Okay, that's good. How many of you are grandparents? Nobody yet. I'm not one yet either, but I'm hoping that someday I'll have that wonderful opportunity. So thank you for that. Let's see. Want to say first, before I start talking about both things we learned from research, but also things that we learned from working directly with children and families, is that there's no such thing as a perfect parent. I hope you're not disappointed. I hear somebody seconding me in the background there. And there's also no such thing as a perfect parent. So it's important that we be good to ourselves and that we appreciate the hard work that we do every day with our children when we're with them and when we're not with them. Because when we're not with them, I can probably imagine that all of you are thinking about them every moment of every day. So I want to address connection in two ways. First, I want to stress the importance of connection in terms of the relationships that parents and children build with one another. In particular, we're going to look at the children's attachment to their primary caregivers. And when I say caregiver, I mean it's typically defined as someone who cares regularly for a child, such as a parent. It's typically the parents, a grandparent, a nanny, older siblings, aunties, uncles, etc. In the field of early childhood development, we know that a child's early experience with a caregiver has a lasting impact on the child's well-being and development. Infants need consistent, predictable, and loving caregivers to respond to their needs in order to develop a sense of trust in themselves and also in the world. Children use their parents' support to gradually separate and explore the world and develop a positive sense of self-worth and self-esteem. They also need help from their parents when they become frightened by something or overwhelmed by powerful feelings. A great example of being overwhelmed by a powerful feeling is a toddler having a major tantrum. How many of you have experienced that with your children? Yeah, me too. Twice over. Children can exhibit what we call attachment behaviors. That is expressing fear, distress, needing to stay close to a primary caregiver when they anticipate an impending separation from their parent or when something or someone frightens them. Children also want to connect to their parents to share an enjoyable moment, to feel their parents' love for them. We will learn tonight that the ways in which parents respond to these attachment behaviors will result in differences in the quality of a parent-child attachment. The parent-child relationship encompasses the attachment behavior, but also includes their interactions, communications, and their expectations and experiences of one another. The second aspect of connection that I want to address is the support that parents offer children to help them make connections between feelings, and their behaviors and reactions. That it is so crucial and important to value internal experience and its importance in shaping a person. A great example might be, I know parents at home are always asking me what to do to help their child get out of the house in the morning, because it just seems so frantic if you're going to work, trying to get ready to go to work, if you're trying to get your child to school, trying to get them breakfast, getting them dressed, making sure they have everything, getting through that separation where everybody feels pretty intact and okay to start the day. If we can be more aware of what our children might be experiencing during those transitions, perhaps we can offer them support and offer ourselves support so that you can navigate that transition successfully. The other incident that parents often talk about is how to get out of work and get to the grocery store without having your child have a tantrum in the grocery store because they're exhausted and it's been a long day and really all they want is to be home and with you. So first, we're going to study connection and relationships. John Bowlby, who was a British psychiatrist and psychologist and psychoanalyst, is known as the father of attachment. And he didn't start off really studying attachment. He became interested when he was working with delinquent teenagers and discovered that they had suffered early maternal separations and deprivations. This discovery in the 1950s was really quite radical, as during that time in the UK, and I'm assuming in other places in the world, there was really no empathy for delinquents. Rather, they were viewed as bad and evil. Bowlby's interest in attachment and separation led him to study how other mammals raised their young. He learned that when frightened, ground-dwelling animals run to cover, whereas primates run to a protective adult who carries them to safety. He concluded that humans are wired to form attachments and cannot survive without these attachments. In the 1950s, Bowlby published a groundbreaking, empirically based statement that said for a child to be mentally healthy, the infant and young child should experience a warm, intimate, and continuous relationship with his mother. He said mother, I would substitute parent, mother, and father, or a permanent parent substitute, in which both find satisfaction and enjoyment. Then he had this wonderful quote, "Intimate attachments to other human beings are the hub," I love that image of a hub, "around which a person's life revolves, not only as an infant or toddler or school child, but throughout adolescence and years of maturity and well on into old age. From these intimate attachments, a person draws strength and enjoyment of life, and through what she and he contributes gives strength and enjoyment to others. These are matters about which current science and traditional wisdom are one." Now, decades later, we can say from the science, we're hardwired to seek secure relationships. Newborns recognize their mother's faces, voices, and the smell of their breast milk. Infants recognize photos of their mothers at 3 months. We know that infants from early on prefer to look at face-like patterns. There are even some changes in parents as they make that transition into parenthood. There are changes in the brain regions for reward and motivation, and stress and emotional regulation. The production of oxytocin is increased in both mothers and fathers, and that's known as the affiliative hormone. Now to think about, I said that we were also going to talk about connection from the heart. Robert Frost, an American poem, wrote, he didn't write the part we each have within us that has been added by us, but we each have within us an irresistible desire to be irresistibly desired. I'd like to think about it as we all have the desire to be somebody's best beloved. Even infants and young children have this wish. So there have been 5 decades of research, and this research has shown how attachment security is supported and how it's not supported. And this clearly has implications for how we help our children to be resilient. Children who are securely attached are less vulnerable to stress and are open to taking advantage of opportunities for learning and developing. Research has even followed individuals from infancy through adulthood at the University of Minnesota, and many of this cohort are now adults, and they are reaching age somewhere between 30 and 40. From this research, we know that children need support to explore the world. They need support when they're out there exploring, something scares them or overwhelms them. They need to know that there is a safe haven or a holding environment, that is the parent that they can return to and have help regulating their feelings and feel like there's somebody there to protect them and keep them safe. Children need to feel their parents take delight in them and feel that they are, in Robert Frost's words, irresistible. So sometimes when they come back to that safe haven or that secure base, which is you, sometimes they just want to know that they're irresistible. Sometimes a little difficult to feel that way about them if they've been trying to you. Children need sensitive responses from us. They need support regulating emotion I call it feeling felt or feeling like somebody's being with you in a difficult emotional state. That even the difficult ones, anger, sadness, worry, jealousy, they need us to help them regulate those feelings. And this last point I find really the most important point when one is thinking about how parents interact with children and help them develop connection, but also help them develop the ability to manage and express emotion. They need us to be bigger, stronger, wiser, kind. Sometimes when I get to that word kind, people in the audience might say, well, you can't be permissive all the time. So they come to the word kind and they forget that I've already said you need to be bigger and stronger. You need to be kind, but you need to be firm. And that balance between kindness and firmness is what's so important when we parent. We can't always keep it in equal balance. It's impossible. A perfect parent could do that, but remember, they don't exist. But what happens is if the kindness if it's too much kindness, then we become weak. And that's frightening to children if they feel like there's nobody out there to help them manage whatever it is they're trying to manage. If it becomes too firm, then it's mean. And we lose the kindness and we become frightening and scary, and meanness can create all kinds of difficulties with behavior and the ability to organize oneself. The second aspect of connection that I want to talk about is connections to emotion. Recently, there's been important research into the role that mentalization or reflective functioning, those seem like kind of big, jargony words, but what the important role that they have in the development of secure attachments. And what reflective functioning really is the psychological capacity for understanding one's own thoughts, feelings, wishes, desires, beliefs, as well as those of others. This is another kind of connection that can lead to secure attachment and being understood, and that feeling felt or being understood really deepens connections to others. So John Bowlby is the father of attachment theory. Mary Ainsworth, do people know of Mary Ainsworth? Oh, that's good. This will be fun. She's known as the mother of attachment theory. She developed a procedure for assessing the quality of attachment in 12-month-olds following field observations in Uganda and Baltimore. And she spent hours and hours each day for 3 or 4 days a week for several weeks at a time doing these observations. And she found that a mother's sensitive responses to an infant's cues are a critical factor in determining the quality of the child's attachment. Contrary to those who say, here it is. Oh, don't pick up the baby every time he cries or you will spoil him. How many of you have heard that or thought that? Yeah, me too. But contrary to that, she found that caregivers who promptly and effectively responded to young infants' cries had babies who cried less by the end of the first year, indicating that they had confidence in caregivers who had been reliable. The procedure that she developed, that she conducted in a nicely set up playroom in a laboratory, in a research laboratory situation, is called the strange situation. I know that's a strange name for it, but you'll understand why it has that name. During which time a mother and a child spend time in a playroom. The child is left with a stranger, then left alone. The child and mother are reunited after the child is left with the stranger and after the child is left alone. The child's response during the reunion of the mother and child is what determines the quality of the mother-child attachment. Mary Ainsworth differentiated 3 kinds of attachment: secure, and then secure attachment, and 2 kinds of insecure, insecure avoidant and insecure resistant. Children who are securely attached seek physical comfort and contact from the parent on reunion. They're reassured and quickly return to their play. They immediately go, when they hear the door open, they almost can hear it before it opens. They race to the door, they put their arms up, their mother scoops down, picks them up, and within moments, the child is reorganized and is wanting to get down and play. Children who are insecurely attached and avoidant avoid their mothers on reunion. They cry more and explore less. So the mother might pick them, they might go to their mother, and the mother might pick them up, but then they might go like this, put their hands down and turn their head away. Or they might turn around as soon as the mother enters the room. Children who are insecurely attached and resistant fail to be comforted on reunion. They might return to play, but they don't settle down. So they might look like they're getting comforted, but then they can't seem to settle down. So there's a lot of back and forth with attempts to try to get comforted. Research has indicated, and now this research comes from those longitudinal studies, so I follow the children from infancy up until adulthood. Securely attached children have mothers who are warm and sensitive, consistent, and respond quickly to the baby's cries. When they enter preschool, they are socially competent, well-liked by their classmates, and are peer leaders. Their teachers, now the children who like them don't know that they're securely attached. Neither do the teachers. The teachers treat them with warmth and respect, have high expectations for them, and age-appropriate standards. Securely attached children demonstrate a greater capacity for self-regulation, effective social interactions, positive self-esteem, self-reliance, and adaptive coping skills. Typically, they present as secure adults and have trusting and lasting relationships. As adults, they tend to have high self-esteem, are comfortable with sharing feelings with important people in their lives, and seek out support. In general, they have a greater capacity for happiness in marriage. Insecure avoidant children have mothers who are often unavailable or rejecting and dislike the child's neediness. The baby seeks little physical contact by 12 months, is unresponsive to being held, but often upset when put down. In preschool, the insecure avoidant children are often angry, defiant, and aggressive. They're often isolated and disliked. Their teachers are often angry with them, nurture them less, and are controlling and have low expectations for them. Other children tend to describe them as mean or aggressive. Children who are avoidant as babies tend to become adults who are dismissive and may have problems with intimacy. They invest little emotion in social and marital relationships and are reluctant to share thoughts and feelings with others. Insecure resistant children have a caregiver who's inconsistent in availability when the child is distressed. The children cry more and explore less. They do not develop expectations that a caregiver will be consistently available. The children will seek proximity to the caregiver when distressed, but they're angry and difficult to soothe. As preschoolers, the resistant children are liked the least, are usually victimized, and are not socially competent. Teachers are warm but highly controlling with resistant children. However, they do not expect compliance and set low standards for them. Resistant children tend to become adults who are reluctant to become close to others, worry that significant others do not love them, and become very upset when relationships end. The research has indicated that the percentage of secure children in the general population where this technique has been used, and it's been used in many countries, it has not been used in the UAE, but the percentage, now my math isn't going to work out, so it's going to, but you'll get the gist of it. About 65% of the time they're securely attached, and then it's about 19% versus 9% of avoidant at the 19 and resistant at the 9%. There was another attachment category that was later described by Mary Main and Judith Solomon, which is disorganized attachment. It occurs when the haven of safety is really the source of the child's fear. The pathological response happens when the parents are frightening or frightened, and the child is unable to manage unregulated fear or distress. The precursors to disorganized attachment include maltreatment, substance abuse by the parent, frightening behavior by the parent, or unresolved loss or trauma. In a disorganized attachment, children develop strategies that focus their behavior into attempts to organize or reassure the parent, or into attempts to coerce or attack the parent. The parent is often frightening or frightened. The children have no organized way of coping with anxiety within the relationship. They engage in activities such as self-endangerment. They can be very clingy and inhibited, hypervigilant, and hypercompliant. They often take on a parenting role. They tend to have difficulty calming after stressful events. And even with self-regulation and self-esteem, they typically engage in what are called externalizing behaviors and then have problem behaviors in school and struggle with academics. So when a relationship is in trouble, there's always, what's important is that there's a lot of plasticity, there's always room for repair. And remember, what children really need to feel secure is what Winnicott said is a good enough parent. Perfect ones do not exist. Change is always possible, but it can be constrained by the paths that have been taken. I want to give you this example of Izzy. Izzy at 5 months was very withdrawn and irritable. Pictures of her, you could see her lying on, she was well cared for. She was lying on a blanket with some very age-appropriate toys, but she was just lying there, staring just into space. Her mother was not sitting very far away from her, but her mother was suffering from a postpartum depression and having difficulty connecting to Izzy, and she felt like a terrible mother. So while the mother's sitting close by, the mother also is staring off into space, not connecting at all with Izzy. She sought help. She knew that she was in trouble with her baby, and she really wanted to feel that love and connection to her baby. After several months of work in dyadic mother-child support with her therapist, Izzy's mother became less depressed and began to connect to her. Izzy became less irritable and more connected to her mother and began to develop much more robustly. At 12 months, however, during the strange situation, much to the disappointment of the therapist and the mother, because they were both so excited with how much growth Izzy and her mom had made together. But during the strange situation, after her mother left, she became very quiet and withdrawn. And then she could not find a way to be soothed after the reunion with her mother. She went to her right away. She hugged her. Her mother held her and soothed her, got down on the floor with her, helped her to play. Izzy crawled away from her, started to play, but then just collapsed on the floor again. And that happened like three or four times. This reaction seemed to indicate an insecure attachment. And even though the relationship had improved significantly through the months of intervention, Izzy still struggled with her when her mother withdrew from her or separated from her. But what was good about doing this is that it became clear that this was an area of vulnerability for Izzy, an area that it would be important for adults to know about, so that when she's feeling at her most vulnerable, there are people who can help her manage it and deal with it. In summary, we know, after 50 years of research, that the more secure children are, the more they are able to do all these things. And there's another page, and I think all of these define resilience. I'm not going to read them out loud. I'm going to point to a couple of my favorites. You might have some favorites too. Enjoy more happiness. Turn to their parents for help when in trouble. That's so crucial, maybe not so much in toddlerhood or preschool, but when they reach adolescence, that's a key skill for a child and a parent to have. Better relationships with brothers and sisters. If you have more than one child, you know that that's a nice thing. Higher self-esteem. If it's only that they get from having a secure attachment, that's fabulous. Trusting that good things will come their way, and know how to be kind to those around them. Now I want to explore the second C, which I call coping. The more secure children are, the better they are able to cope. They have their own ways of dealing with anxiety, strong emotion, and disappointments about parents, siblings, school, friends, activities, etc. Some of these strategies they've learned by watching us, and others they've developed on their own. Some of them work, and some of them don't work. I call them and that would mean some are adaptive and some are not. I have a couple of examples here. One, I was on vacation and happened to be watching a 2-year-old playing with his grandmother, and he was playing ball, and he got really frustrated because the ball he was playing with landed at the top of a short but pretty steep hill, and his little legs weren't really going to get up that hill. He tried to climb, but the ball was just out of reach, so he climbed up, and he just couldn't get it. He tried 2 more times, but to no avail. Finally, with his grandmother's encouragement, he took a running start and retrieved the ball and turned around with a huge smile, showed his grandma the ball, and was just delighted. A less adaptive resolution would occur if the child refused the help, did not try a different strategy, and dissolved into a crying tantrum. Both of these reactions can be very normal and very typical. Our children need us the most when their strategies are not working, such as in that above example. As we support our children in developing coping strategies, it's helpful to remember that in order for there to be growth and maturation, it's natural for them to experience conflict. The conflict can be within themselves. A common conflict experienced by toddlers might be, do I want to be a baby or do I want to be a big girl? And that can be a conflict that comes online when there's a new baby that arrives, or it can occur at other times. Or between a conflict between oneself and the outside world. Do I want my daddy to dress me, or do I want to dress myself? Recently, I was speaking with my Yale students about the normal turmoil, stress, and anxiety that children experience as they're working over time to develop mastery over their needs and drives, both with the support of their parents as well as the support of their own growing developmental skills in language, cognition, perception, motor competence, and expression and regulation of emotions. 2 of the students asked questions that indicated they were looking for ways to alleviate the turmoil. I'll just talk about one. One of the students described a large family gathering in which one of her infant cousins had a very strong stranger anxiety reaction, and the student wondered what could have been done to prevent that reaction and wondered whether more exposure to strangers would have helped her to be less anxious. And I kind of took a breath and I thought, okay, I'm going to let her think about this a little bit more and then we'll talk about it. What was not tolerable for the adults was that this baby was so upset in the presence of those who loved her very much, and they all wanted to do something to lessen the anxiety. The reality is the anxiety is an important signal that the infant gives. It says, this is too much for me. I'm overwhelmed. Please do not overwhelm me anymore. This stranger anxiety is short-lived if the baby's anxiety is seen as a signal of upset and is sensitively responded to. Even this early on, if the baby's signals of anxiety are responded to as upset, the babies begin to learn, and it happens right from the beginning, that their feelings matter and are understood, and they begin to develop a sense of themselves as authentic and genuine. If children are expected to push down and deny negative feelings because we don't want them to feel anxious or in turmoil, what happens is the development of a false self and a difficulty in recognizing and regulating emotion. The next example is one that I really love. It was a different student who wrote about the difficulty a child was having on the playground, and they're 4-year-olds in a preschool class. Rachel and Sasha are riding around on a 2-person bike. Rachel's pedaling and Sasha's sitting quietly in the back. Rachel pedals down a small incline by the sandbox. She turns around the bike and struggles to pedal back up the hill, but she has a pretty heavy load for a little 4-year-old. Sasha, sitting in the back, has her feet crossed and makes no moves to help. Rachel grunts in frustration as the bike proves too heavy to move. "Help!" she whines, slumping her body. "Sasha, help!" Rachel does not turn her body to engage Sasha, but instead directs her imperative out into the space ahead of her. Sasha sits in the back calmly, seeming not to even hear Rachel's cries. Sasha, Rachel cries again. Sasha does nothing. John, a teacher, actually this is a teacher at a school, and he's been there for 40 years, and he's an amazing teacher, much beloved by many generations of children. He approaches the scene and says, "What's wrong, Rachel?" She turns to him, slumps down further in her bike seat. "Sasha won't help me push." John turns to Sasha and requests, "Sasha, why don't you use your feet to help Rachel?" Sasha looks down at her crossed feet and says quietly to the ground, "I don't want to mess up my shoes. I'm worried they'll fall off." John nods and turns to Rachel, patiently stating, "I'll help push you up the hill." He pushes the bike halfway up the small incline, then instructs Rachel to begin pedaling. Rachel mimes an exaggerating pedaling motion, but her feet don't actually press down on the pedals. "I can't do it," she cries. Her head slopes upward and her mouth opens, forlorn, apparent on her face. "Come on now, Rachel," John says. "You aren't pushing." Rachel stands up from the bike then and stomps her foot up and down on the pavement in anger. "She's not helping," she shouts, referring to Sasha. Her face scrunches up and she appears close to tears. High drama, huh? Lots of drama. The student then commented, "I have always been intimidated and nervous when I see conflict in a school. I become concerned when children behave irrationally and act out in a manner that seems disproportionate to the situation. The situation I observed seems to be exemplary of a child's intense reaction to a minor conflict. However, as I've come to learn through readings, growth and maturing involve conflict." And I thought, yes, she's learned something really important. "At this age, children sometimes have trouble sharing and cooperating, for they're not yet able to see things from another vantage point and understand each other's motivations." Children also need to cope with stress. Positive stress might be something like starting a new school or meeting a new friend. Tolerable stress might be making a move, moving to a new city, or being in the hospital. And toxic stress would probably be experiencing a trauma. Children are always supported through any of these kinds of stress by supportive, consistent adults. I've been distressed by a billboard on the highway near my home advertising a school, and it says, "7th graders doing high school level work." Now, I'm not opposed to stretching and taking on challenges, but it does help to remind ourselves every now and then that there is not an Olympic event to race through childhood or elementary school. It's over way too fast, and I don't think we want our children to peak in preschool, elementary school, or middle school and feel the stress that comes along with this pushing. So I'd like to think of stressing rather than pushing. Stretching, not stressing. Finally, we come to the third C, and that's what I call confidence. Certainly, nature helps us out here. In all children, there is a drive towards progressive development, as well as an innate drive to explore, manipulate, and master the world. It's wonderful to see this drive in its purest form. How many of you have images in your head of when your children first started to walk? I do. And it's great because you see their faces and they're lit up with such exuberance and joy. And usually they have their arms out in front of them. They often need that to balance, but it also seems to communicate, "Come on, everybody, look at me. I'm pretty special." And they work. They might fall down, but they get up and they want to do it over and over and over again. They want to hold your hand to get around. They love it. Have you seen the movie Babies? How many have seen the movie Babies? Again, a wonderful movie. If you haven't seen it, you can download it from iTunes. It follows 4 babies from their birth through their first year of life, one from the United States, one from Japan, one from Africa, and one from Mongolia. And what's so wonderful about this is, they're all living in very different environments. But at the end of the movie, They all have mastered walking, and they all have this same incredible reaction. Look how great I am. Look how good I feel. So allowing these progressive drives and these drives to kind of go out in the world and really explore what they can do and master some things, it really supports growing confidence in our children. To support this drive and growing confidence, we need to know the difference between stretching and pushing, and when to stand back and support exploration, and when our children need support and holding. I have a couple of take-home messages. Dr. Sally Province was one of my teachers, a pediatrician and a psychoanalyst who was really a pioneer in developing the field of early childhood development and infant mental health. And she said often, embrace complexity. We as parents are complex, and our children are complex. And there aren't simple solutions to the struggles that we have. They're very complex. I wouldn't even say solutions. They're complex ways of understanding our children and understanding ourselves and being parents to them. She also said, don't just do something, stand there and pay attention. Your child is trying to tell you something. We often assume that we know pretty quickly what our child is feeling and thinking without really watching and trying to find out from what we see, from what their behavior shows us, from what their play shows us, from what their communications show us. So it always is really important. Okay, let me just watch. Let me just think about this for a minute. And then finally, even young children have an internal experience of themselves and others, events, and their feelings. We don't always know what that is. Even if you were the biggest expert in child development, you're still not going to always know what that is. We do know that if we acknowledge and attempt to know that experience and help children make connections between their feelings and behaviors, we know that children can feel better, more organized internally, less alone, open to experiencing a range of feelings, and will be more secure. And finally, when we experience a child as spoiled, selfish, mean, or some other negative characteristic, take a moment and reflect. Why am I thinking that? What do I mean by that? How might my child be feeling? And how can I communicate what I'm feeling? So thank you. Thank you for being so attentive.